And we're gonna dive straight into that second talk, which will be given by two people from @Annie. I would like to welcome to our virtual stage Junde Yu and Lexi Sydow. I hope I pronounced those names right. So please come in. And they're going to talk about undercover market opportunities and expand your gaming portfolio by understanding gamer preferences. It's a long title, but definitely interesting topic. Welcome.
Hello, Martin.
Hi. Whenever you're ready, feel free to start.
Is my screen live?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, great. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Welcome to Pocket Gamer Connects and welcome to the App Annie session, Understanding Gamer Preferences. I'm Junde from App Annie, and today I'm here with my colleague Lexi. We are really excited to present some of the latest and most unique game industry insights from App Annie to uncover granular market opportunities and top-performing game features. Today, we'll also show you highlights from GameIQ, which is a product we launched back in September, and this is a product that was designed specifically for games companies. And so, before we start, here is a quick disclaimer about our data and presentation. Okay, so we will start with a simple introduction of ourselves and our company. My name is Junde. I'm the General Manager of Gaming at App Annie. I've been at App Annie for over 7 years, today based out of our Singapore office, which is one of our 12 global offices. And throughout my career, I've worked with lots of game companies globally across market data, analytics, demand, and monetization. And also today with me, we have Lexi.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lexi Sydow. I am a Senior Market Insights Manager at App Annie, and I actually just hit my 5 years at the company, I think last week.
Great to hear. And here's a quick introduction about App Annie Company. We are the mobile performance standard. Through our mobile data and insights platform, we help create winning mobile experiences for those aspiring to achieve excellence. And here are some of the global companies that trust in our data, products, and teams. So, moving on to today's presentation, we will cover 3 main parts. First, I will do a short introduction of our GameIQ product, and Lexi will go on to present some of the most unique and granular game insights. And finally, we will present some customer use cases of GameIQ. Okay, let's get started. So, GameIQ is a game changer for the mobile games industry. It provides a detailed taxonomy that allows us to break down every market, publisher, and app to analyze areas of opportunity and reasons for success. So App Annie GameIQ consists of 2 major parts, taxonomy and tags. So here's a quick overview of taxonomy. Basically, we've taken this a few steps beyond the existing taxonomies on the app stores by classifying games into granular and up-to-date subgenres. For instance, on the app stores, today existing taxonomy, you would have the puzzle genre. But here we've broken it down into further subgenres like bubble, cardboard, hidden object, match 3, match plus build, physics-based, and so on. Next, what about what happens inside the game? We've grouped it into 5 main types of tags, and here we show examples of 3 types of tags here, monetization, art style, and gameplay. So under monetization, you would have examples of tags like, does this game contain advertising or battle pass, VIP, subscription, starter packs, and so on. So when we put all these together, this is how it would look like with an app. So let's look at this app that is Marvel Strike Force by Scopely. Under the existing taxonomy, this will be categorized under the role-playing category. And with GameIQ, this is firstly a core game, then it is an RPG game, then it is a specific turn-based game with all these 18 tags across art style, gameplay features, monetization, and even tagging it with the Marvel IP. So this sums up our GameIQ offering at the app level, and you will get a lot more amazing insights at the publisher level, country level, subgenre level, and so on. So with that, I'll hand it over to Lexi to take you through the insights. Okay.
Thank you, Junde. I
am, okay.
All right. Okay. So I'll take you guys through now a bit of the insights that we have from our GameIQ product. So there's a lot of great stuff that we've been able to derive from here. So this is just a little bit of a taste of what's available. So what we could see in the first half of 2020 is So kind of to look at this chart, there's a lot going on, but basically the pink is core games, the casino games are that darker purple, and then the middle purple is casual games. But we can break that down into all of these different genres and subgenres. So what's really interesting is that of all consumer spend in the app stores, strategy and RPG specifically drove nearly half of all global consumer spend. So we've highlighted RPG as well as strategy. The other thing that we can see as well is we can start to take some of those subgenres. So that's that kind of third layer of depth. We can look at sort of how they've grown globally and look at that kind of growth factor of the spend from H1 2019 to H1 2020. And what's really interesting is that we see all the different sort of higher levels represented. So there's the pink again is core, the darker blue is casino, and then the purple is casual. But we can see which specific subgenre within core was, seeing some of the most growth or contributing some of the largest growth. And so that shows you kind of a deeper level that you would not get just by looking at, say, core as a whole. What's also interesting is that we see that simulation and then going further into sandbox also had a strong growth here. And what we want to call out is that, this would include games such as Roblox, which in the app stores is categorized as adventure, but we've taken it multiple steps further to kind of give you that more granular insights here. Okay, so this is another great view. I really love this one. So we're looking at two things here. This is sort of a quadrant view to help you sort of visualize a bit more of the emerging trends in the space. So on the y-axis, we've got average time per user. So that's that depth of engagement. And then on the x-axis, we have active users. And we're looking at the growth factor here. So there's a couple things to call out. The first is that we see within the casual genre, puzzle subgenre, and then, casual tuning, puzzle genre, and then card board subgenre, we see that they've seen phenomenal growth in active users. So really reached a large audience and seen growth coming from that kind of average performer quadrant as a subgenre overall into the challenger space. We see a similar trend for sandbox subgenre, which falls under the casual overall umbrella. We again moved from average performers as a subgenre into the challenger space. And then one of the big sort of large trends we've seen this year is just the growth of battle royale, especially as people have been kind of hunkered down at home and looking for things that connect as well as entertain, to stay connected with your friends. So we see here that as a subgenre, battle royale within core overall kind of broke out, saw greater depth of engagement as well as breadth of engagement, and broke out of that kind of niche player into an attention leader space. All right, this is there's a lot going on here, but basically this is a really cool view. I really love looking at some of the differences among regions as well as countries. What's really interesting is that we start to see, so this is looking at kind of one of our main tags that we have. So there's a theme and setting tag that we're able to look at with Game IQ. And what's really interesting is that in the first half of the year, across all of the markets analyzed here, we see that fantasy games actually overall was one of the main themes or settings of games that people were downloading for new games, which makes a lot of sense since a lot of us might have been stuck at home during a lot of COVID lockdowns and looking for that escape. What's really interesting is that you see among all of these different markets, the differences in what type of fantasy games people are playing. So it's not enough just to say, okay, we're all playing these different types of fantasy games. There's a very big difference on what those games are, from Brawl Stars in some markets to Pokemon Go or Coin Master. They're very different types of games. We also start to see those trends, like different themes and settings emerge under different markets, right? Casino gambling is big in the US. We've got sports and soccer showing up in Brazil. And we see that kind of play out over many different markets here. So there's those differences at play. We also can look at the kind of buckets of games, both kind of multiple things happening here. We're looking at it by how those games played out in, say, a certain time period like H1 by downloads, by time spent, and by consumer spend. And then we're also able to see how those differences are on a market level. So downloads is the first chart here, where it's mostly casual games dominating the most downloaded games for that time period across most markets. we start to see in time spent that core games start to really over-index a bit more than they are for downloads. And we also see, especially in APAC markets, that core represents a greater portion of overall time spent. And for consumer spend, it's a much different story, right? We still see casual showing up, but core is the bulk of most markets for driving consumer spend, and really is the lion's share in markets like Japan, South Korea, and Indonesia. And I'd also like to call out on this slide, if we looked at the US, casino represents 22% of overall spend, yet only about 4% of downloads in the first half of the year. So those are some key insights to know for those specific markets. This is another really amazing thing we were able to do. We're able to slice and dice by our tags. So as Junde mentioned before, we have monetization method tagged for all of these different games. And we're able to look at that within the realm of core. So if we want to get very specific, looking at monetization methods among core games, there are a couple of things I'll call out in this view. The first is that among core games, actually, gacha loot boxes are the most prevalent monetization method used across nearly every market here. What we're also able to see is that we do see advertising is something that we're starting to see this sort of the hybrid model emerge here. And we'll touch base on that a little bit later, but obviously you would expect that not to be the bulk for most core games. Then we can look at this and how the spread, how each country sort of looks. So one thing I'll call out that's noteworthy is just when we look at China, we're able to see, that they over-index and use certain monetization methods more in core games than other markets. So things like starter packs or VIP or cosmetic items, they definitely over-index relative to the rest of the markets we're looking at here and the global sort of average, which is that dark blue bar here. And then the last thing I'll leave you with that's also very interesting to look at is just that in-app advertising space, right? So these are the hybrid models. It's using ads as well as other mechanics, because these are the top charts by the top core games by consumer spend. So these are both in-app purchases, and then also we're seeing that in America and Europe, that there's a lot more of an inclination to incorporate in-app ads alongside traditional in-app purchases within core games. That's not necessarily the case in China, Japan, or South Korea, as you can see in this chart, but it is a trend to keep note of and one that we have seen growing in this space. All right, and then this is a quick view. We're able to see there's some great maps that can visualize some of the subgenres and genres within GameIQ. So what we're able to see is that for hyper-casual apps, hyper-casual games, we're able to see that the US is the #1 market for downloads, yet only commanding about a 15% share of total downloads in H1. Also #1 for consumer spend, but equating to about 40% of overall consumer spend. And then we can see, this is of the most downloaded games, we're able to see where those games were published. So for most markets, the most downloaded games came from French publishers in H1. And we can look at that view for a slightly different genre or subgenre like city battle games, where we're able to see a slightly different spread, as well as looking at the publisher HQ of those games. And the bulk of them actually do come from China for most markets that we see. What's interesting is there is a little bit of homegrown apps taking a bit more of the space for the US, as you can see in the purple bar here. So I'll leave you with just a few key findings and hand it back to Junde. So basically, one of the key things we saw in H1 was that there are over 5 billion downloads of hyper-casual games globally. We also saw that over half of time spent in top games was in core games, which is a testament to how mobile is a very competitive gaming platform at this point in time, as well as the increased sort of casual gamer that's starting to dabble in a bit more of the core genres of games. We also saw that for casino games, consumer spend grew 40% year over year in H1. And we saw that 20% of the total time spent in the top mobile games by MAU was in battle royale games, despite those games only representing 3% of downloads. So battle royale really punching above their weight for engagement. And then we also saw that 80% of total consumer spend in action RPG games came from APAC markets. So definitely driving the lion's share of engagement and spend there. And I'll pass that back to Junde.
Thank you. So let's go on to use cases. So firstly, let's take a look at some in-game elements that result in the success of a game. So in the third quarter of this year, there was a huge growth unicorn amongst casual games. It shot up from the left bottom over here all the way to the top right over here, and to emerge as the top downloaded game globally for both downloads and revenues. For both downloads and active users. So who amongst us knows this game? Yes, and it is Among Us. Okay, so a key contributor to the success of this game came from the social features. So firstly, we see that this game has got chat and multiplayer tags amongst all the gameplay features. And to note, these chat and multiplayer are not common occurrences in casual games, but of course they are very common in the core games. And the importance of social here is also supported by this summary of the top keywords from all the favorable app reviews in the US. So you can see that the friends theme does come up a lot, especially from people who enjoy the game and give it a high rating. Next, let's take a look at how these social features impact what happens inside the game. Here is a quadrant chart that's generated by the App Annie Insights generator. And on the left, you see this list of all the gameplay features that we have. And we map all these out on this chart of usage stickiness, which is measuring open rate against the average active days. So you can see that games containing social features like friend invites, MMO, chat, and social assists appear on the top right quadrant. These features are part of the success equation of games that have high usage stickiness. And as Lexi mentioned just now, high usage usually also leads to high revenues, either via ad monetization or in-app purchases. So the same chart, but we look at this same quadrant chart, but with this time, revenues against active users. So you can see that features like chat, multiplayer, friend invites, and leaderboard are also part of this success equation for apps that have high usage and high monetization. And additionally, what we've also noticed about Among Us is that it has very high affinity with Gen Z, the Gen Z user demographic. We've observed that users of Among Us also have a high cross-app affinity with apps of other Gen Z heavy apps like Discord, Google Classroom, Twitch, and Line Webtoon. So all these numbers you see on screen, they're basically talking about, for instance, the first app, Discord, is slightly over 3. It means that users of Among Us are 3 times more likely to also use, compared to the general population, to also use Discord. Okay. So finally, here's a view of other top performing casual titles with social features. On the left, we see a chart of top casual games with social features ranked by downloads, and on the right, it's ranked by consumer spend. So aside from impacting downloads and consumer spend, I also think it's contributed to the longevity of titles and IPs like Subway Surfers, which has actually been around since 2012, and also other titles like Magic Tiles, Talking Tom, Roblox, and more. Okay, so moving on to the second use case, which subgenres to expand to. So this use case came up in an interesting webinar with Outfit 7 a few weeks ago. They were looking to expand to other subgenres following their massive hits in the Tamagotchi subgenre. So let's take a look at this chart, which they did internally. So they were looking at the cross-app affinity and the cross-app usage of My Talking Tom versus all the other subgenres of games, all the games in the world. So all these dots on the chart, gray dots on the charts here, it represents games that the users also play. So an app that appears at the top right here would have high affinity and high cross-app usage with My Talking Tom. So they had a hypothesis that Talking Tom users would have high affinity with Match 3 gamers. But when they loaded the Game IQ data, they observed this. So firstly, the red dots represent Match 3, which are at the bottom left of the chart, which means that there is low cross affinity and low cross usage. Instead, arcade runner games and of course their own Tamagotchi games scored high on this cross usage chart and affinity chart. So they were able hence to decide on runner games against Match 3 games. Another example, which they called it the crazy ideas example, was that App Annie data was also used to validate crazy ideas at Outfit 7. So in this case, Their crazy idea was to marry this Coin Master game, which is a hybrid casino game with high distribution with covered fashion, which is a casual game that has high monetization. So they looked into the affinity data between these two subgenres, and it turns out that in terms of the cross usage, it's only just 5% between these two subgenres, which ranks it as 39th out of a possible 104 subgenres. In terms of affinity, this ranks at 2.4x, which is ranked at 58th out of 104 subgenres. So they killed this idea. They killed this crazy idea, and we won't see this mining fashion Tom hybrid game anytime soon. Okay, so with that, we've come to the end of our sharing today. And this is a quick summary of what we presented. Firstly, the latest market opportunities by the granular subgenres. We've also broken down some in-game elements of the recently successful casual games. And finally, we explored some opportunities for expansion, not just by market size, but also by looking into what your users also play. So thank you for everyone's attention today. Here's a couple of links where you can get more information about our products and our industry reports. So thank you, and we move on to the question answer session.
Yes, yes, indeed. First of all, thank you so much for yet again a very insightful talk. I always love using App Annie for insights. Yeah, we do have a couple of good questions came into the QA, and we do have a few minutes left for them. So let me start at the top. Joe is wondering, how realistic of a threat to App Annie's business model is Apple and Google's offering of more fine-grained app classifications and insights?
I think it's a little bit different. I think Apple and Google, they provide, they're more of a B2C model. And I think for consumers, just understand the current taxonomy is good enough for consumers. And what we provide is more for the B2B space for people to analyze the market sizing and so on. So I think it's a different need. Yeah.
Right. And then someone who kind of has a question about the use of your tool. By experience, what is the learning curve for developers to get used to the more detailed classification?
To be honest, we already work with a lot of developers globally. I mean, like Playtaker, Rovio, IGG, EA, and so on. So I think for a lot of the sophisticated developers, they had already been developing their own taxonomy even before we did. You know, so there was always they already saw a need to go into more granular subcategories. And I think as for the other developers who have not kind of looked into this with App Annie, I hope that this presentation is a kind of an easy step up into introducing, you know, I mean, it's like everyone's talking about hyper casual these days. And for an aspiring developer, a startup developer, they might think, you know, okay, I should do hyper casual because everyone's talking about it. And now it's only all the French developers doing it. I should do something for Asia or something, you know, but hyper casual is so big. If I'm trying to monetize via video ads, or I'm trying to monetize via IP, or I'm trying to monetize via starter packs and so on, which type of hyper casual should I make? I think that's the kind of entry level use case that we can solve, and with that, it's easy to get to more advanced levels.
All right, definitely.
I'll add to that and just say that the data it creates this type of classification. I found it's very fun as well, as you kind of saw with some of the examples, like what Junde was saying with Outfit 7, is they came with a crazy idea and they were just like, let's see if this would surprise us and work. And I think that that's what is actually quite fun about this type of rich classification data, is you can start testing really interesting granular and detailed hypotheses, and you can start playing it out with our data, so that you're, you know, as a developer, you're not spending your resources and money developing something that you haven't sort of tested within the realms of data that could show you an indication. So I do think I don't feel like there's that big of a learning curve. I think it's more, it's exciting, and it's actually quite easy to get your hands into it because it's so, there's so many possibilities.
Definitely. Still sounded like a great game concept to me, by the way. All right, next question is kind of about the regulations in different parts of the world. With gacha and loot boxes having some legal issues in some regions, what geos took best advantage of this monetization model?
I think Gacha has actually been around for quite a number of years, and it's still around now. And it's adopted in a lot of core games, and it's quite global in terms of the penetration and how consumers are able to understand it. I think in some big markets, so having said that it's global, but I think some big markets like China, they're starting to come up with some legislation around it. Like in China, I think the guideline is that you must state what are the odds of getting something and what will you get. So it's less of a blind gamble, so you know what you may get or may not get and what the odds are. So that's I think how some countries have gone about it. And in terms of I think what's been what has come up on my radar a bit more in some countries like China, India is a bit more of the which could have, which is kind of like what you say here. Geo's taking advantage of this is in the area of real money gaming or cashback games. That's what we've been hearing a lot more, and we think there might be some regulation and guideline coming up soon to regulate this as well.
I see, yeah. And I think our last question for today is also kind of a little bit hooking into the question of regional data. Do you see any changes on the data with issues in India, relating to the PUBG being blocked?
Yes, of course. I mean, our data is sourced from developers and our panels globally. So if people stop using the apps because the apps cannot connect to the servers because of local legislation or blocks, then we would register no data for those. So we register no downloads if they are pulled off the stores, and we register no usage data and revenues if the access is blocked, of course. But of course, there are still users who find their ways to get around these blocks sometimes in some areas.
Exactly. All right. I think we are also out of time for this session. So I'd like to say a huge thanks to both of you for sharing all these insights.